I have proof that Henry is manipulating my sister, draining her financially and emotionally, but she's so deep in denial she can't see it. Mark wants to help but is scared of losing Henry's friendship. Meanwhile, our parents think I'm the problem. How do you help someone who's so committed to their own destruction? How do you watch your sister disappear into someone you don't even recognize anymore? I don't know what to do anymore. I have proof that Henry is manipulating my stepsister, but she's so deep in denial she can't see it. How do I help someone who doesn't want to be helped? Update 2. Just when I thought this situation couldn't get any more complicated, everything has taken an even darker turn. I've barely slept in the past 3 days, and my hands are still shaking as I type this. It started on Monday morning when Mark called me in a complete panic. Henry had vanished without a trace. He hadn't come back to the apartment for 2 days, which wasn't entirely unusual given his drinking habits, but this time felt different. His phone was going straight to voicemail, and he'd cleared out his belongings from Mark's place. The final red flag was that he'd somehow accessed their shared Xbox account and sold off all their digital games, worth over $800. I immediately tried calling Rachel, putting aside our recent issues because I was genuinely worried about Henry doing something stupid. She picked up on the first ring, her voice tight with panic. She'd been trying to reach him since Saturday night when he didn't come home for dinner. At first, she thought he was just blowing off steam at a bar, but then she noticed money missing from her wallet, and her credit card was maxed out with charges she didn't recognize. We spent the next 24 hours in a frantic search. Rachel and I drove to every bar, casino, and gaming center Henry frequented. We called hospitals, checked with his other friends, and even reached out to his estranged parents in Ohio. Rachel was oscillating between hysteria and anger, alternating between crying about Henry being hurt somewhere and blaming me for pushing him over the edge with my confrontation last week. The breakthrough came yesterday afternoon when Tom, the owner of the Red Lion pub where Henry was a regular, reached out to me. He had security camera footage from Saturday night showing Henry in the bar, but what we saw on that footage made my stomach turn. Henry wasn't alone. He was with 2 guys Tom recognized as local loan sharks, known for preying on desperate gamblers. The footage showed them leaving together around midnight, with Henry looking nervous but going willingly. Tom pulled me aside and revealed something he'd been keeping quiet about. Henry had been borrowing money from these guys for weeks. Small amounts at first, a couple hundred here and there, always promising to pay them back when he landed a job. But the amounts kept growing, and Henry kept making excuses about why he couldn't pay. Tom said he tried warning Henry about getting involved with these people, but Henry insisted he had a system, that he just needed one good win to turn everything around. Rachel and I went straight to the police station, but their response was frustrating. Since Henry had left willingly, and it hadn't been 48 hours, they couldn't do much beyond taking down our information. The officer barely looked up from his computer as he explained that adults have the right to disappear if they want to. Even when we mentioned the loan sharks, he just said they'd look into it once they could open a missing persons case. While we were sitting in the police station parking lot, trying to figure out our next move, Rachel finally broke down and told me everything she'd been hiding. Henry's financial destruction went far deeper than anyone knew. He had maxed out 3 credit cards in her name, racking up over $15,000 in debt. He'd been sneaking into underground poker games, losing thousands in single nights. The final straw was discovering he'd pawned her grandmother's antique jewelry collection, pieces that had been in her family for generations and were meant to be passed down to her future daughters. She'd been keeping all of this secret out of shame, afraid of anyone finding out how bad things had gotten. She admitted that she'd known about his gambling for months, but convinced herself she could handle it on her own. Every time she confronted him, he'd break down crying, promise to get help, and then go right back to his old habits as soon as she turned her back. Just as we were leaving the station, Rachel got a call from an unknown number. A man with a thick accent demanded $5,000 by midnight, saying they'd start sending her photos of what they'd do to Henry if she didn't pay. Rachel was hysterical, ready to empty her retirement account to get the money. I managed to convince her to let me handle it, recorded the call on my phone, and took it straight back to the police. This time, they took it seriously. Turns out these loan sharks were already on their radar for similar extortion schemes. They set up a sting operation, planning to catch them when they came to collect the money. By evening, they had both the loan sharks and Henry in custody. Here's the kicker. Henry was fine. He hadn't been kidnapped or held against his will. He'd been hiding out at their apartment, helping them run their operation, thinking he could work off his debt by bringing in other desperate gamblers. The loan sharks were arrested for extortion, but Henry was released since he claimed they'd forced him to help them. Rachel is still somehow blaming me for all of this. She keeps saying if I hadn't confronted Henry at the BBQ and then again at Mark's place, none of this would have happened. She says I pushed him to be desperate by damaging his self-esteem. Our parents are finally starting to see the reality of the situation, but they're still insisting I should have handled things differently from the start. I don't know what's worse, watching my sister continue to make excuses for someone who's actively destroying her life, or knowing that Henry is still out there, free to keep manipulating and lying to everyone around him. The loan sharks are in jail, but Henry walked away without consequences, already spinning a story about how he was the real victim in all of this. Update 3. Everything I thought I understood about this situation has been completely upended. Yesterday morning, Sarah, one of Rachel's closest friends from the hospital, showed up at my door unannounced. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. She said she couldn't keep quiet anymore about what she knew, even though Rachel had sworn her to secrecy. Sarah and I sat at my kitchen table for nearly 3 hours while she laid out the truth. According to her, Rachel had been planning planning her escape from Henry long before the BBQ incident. She'd been meticulously documenting everything, taking photos of unpaid bills, saving screenshots of their bank accounts showing mysterious withdrawals, recording dates and amounts of money that disappeared from her wallet. She even had a folder of texts where Henry admitted to taking money without asking and promised to pay it back. Rachel had been building her case carefully, consulting with a divorce lawyer in secret 2 months before the BBQ. She'd set up a separate bank account at a different bank and had been slowly moving small amounts of money into it, careful not to alert Henry. Sarah showed me text messages from Rachel from 3 months ago, discussing her exit strategy. The Rachel in those texts was clear-headed and determined, nothing like the defensive, angry person she's become. What really got to me was seeing a photo Sarah had taken of a notebook where Rachel had been tracking Henry's lies, pages and pages of documented falsehoods, fake job interviews that never happened, networking events that didn't exist, courses he claimed to be taking but never enrolled in. Sarah said Rachel would fact-check everything, calling companies to verify interview times, checking course registration dates. She was building an airtight case for divorce. The BBQ confrontation actually played right into Rachel's plans. Sarah said Rachel saw it as the perfect catalyst, a public display of Henry's true nature that would help her family understand why she needed to leave. She'd even texted Sarah right after it happened, saying, "This is exactly what I needed. Now everyone can see what I've been dealing with." But something went terribly wrong. 3 days after the BBQ, all of Rachel's evidence disappeared. The folder on her laptop with all the documentation was gone. Her notebook vanished. Even the separate email account she'd been using to communicate with the divorce lawyer was deleted. Henry somehow found everything and destroyed it all. That's when the real manipulation started. Henry convinced Rachel that losing all that documentation was a sign from the universe that they needed to work things out. He turned everything around, making it seem like I was trying to destroy their marriage out of jealousy or spite. He kept telling her that if their marriage failed now, everyone would blame her for listening to me instead of standing by her husband. Sarah showed me texts from that period too, watching Rachel's resolve crumble in real time. It was heartbreaking to see her go from determined and strong to confused and defensive. Henry had managed to gaslight her so completely that she started doubting her own memories. But here's the part that made my blood run cold. Henry is blackmailing Rachel. Sarah wouldn't tell me exactly what he's holding over her head, saying Rachel needs to tell me herself when she's ready. But it's serious enough that Rachel went from being ready to leave to defending Henry at all costs. Sarah thinks that's why Rachel has been pushing everyone away and acting so erratically. I took all of this information to our parents. Mom broke down crying when she saw the texts from those earlier months, finally understanding how much Rachel had been suffering in silence. Dad wanted to go to the police about the blackmail, but we can't do anything without Rachel's cooperation. Sarah thinks Rachel might be reaching her breaking point. After the incident with the loan sharks, she started asking Sarah questions about her old documentation, trying to remember what proof she had. Sarah's been secretly keeping copies of some of their text conversations, just in case Rachel ever needs them. The hardest part is knowing we can't rush this. Rachel has to come to terms with everything in her own time, but watching her continue to live with someone who's actively destroying her while we all stand by helplessly is torture. Sarah's worried about Rachel's mental state, saying she's noticed her making mistakes at work because she's so distracted and stressed. For now, we're all walking on eggshells, trying to keep lines of communication open while looking for ways to help Rachel see the truth. Henry's behavior is getting more erratic. He's been posting cryptic messages on social media about betrayal and revenge. Sarah thinks he knows Rachel is starting to remember everything and he's getting desperate. Update 4. The truth finally exploded this week, and it's both worse and better than anyone imagined. After days of silence, Rachel showed up at my door at 3 a.m. on Tuesday. She looked absolutely exhausted, but more like her old self than I'd seen in months. She was ready to talk. The blackmail that Henry had been holding over her was about an incident at the hospital 2 years ago. A patient had died under Rachel's care during a particularly chaotic night shift. There had been a full investigation, and Rachel was cleared of any wrongdoing. The patient had a previously undiagnosed condition that no one could have caught in time. But Henry had discovered emails between Rachel and another nurse discussing the case, where Rachel questioned if she could have done something differently. The emails themselves were harmless, just a dedicated nurse processing a difficult loss. But Henry had manipulated and edited them, making it look like Rachel had admitted to making a serious mistake in the patient's care. He threatened to send these doctored emails to the hospital board, the patient's family, and the state nursing board if she ever left him. Rachel was terrified of losing her nursing license, her career, and facing potential legal consequences. She spent months paralyzed by this threat, watching Henry drain their accounts and rack up debt, afraid to say anything. The turning point came last week when she caught Henry trying to hack into her work email again, looking for more material to use against her. Something in her snapped. Rachel went straight to her hospital administration and told them everything. She showed them the original emails, explained Henry's blackmail attempt, and laid out all his financial abuse. The hospital's legal team immediately got involved. They're not just supporting Rachel, they're going after Henry for attempted extortion and cybercrimes. The divorce papers were filed yesterday. Rachel's lawyer, recommended by the hospital's legal team, is aggressive and experienced in cases involving financial abuse. They've already frozen all accounts and are documenting every penny Henry stole or gambled away. The restraining order was approved this morning after Rachel showed the judge evidence of Henry's increasingly threatening behavior. Our parents have done a complete turnaround. They helped Rachel move out while Henry was at a bar yesterday. She's staying in their guest house where he can't find her. Dad hired a security company to install cameras and change all the locks. Mom has been going through Rachel's financial records, helping her document everything Henry did for the divorce proceedings. Henry's mask has completely slipped now that he's lost control. He's been posting unhinged rants on social media, accusing Rachel of being the abusive one, claiming she trapped him in the marriage. He tried showing up at her work, but hospital security was ready for him. His own parents finally reached out to Rachel to apologize. Apparently, he's been calling them constantly, getting drunk and ranting about revenge. Mark and Tom have both agreed to testify about Henry's gambling and his involvement with the loan sharks. The police are taking a renewed interest in the case now that they have evidence of the blackmail. Even Henry's old boss from the pharmaceutical company reached out. Turns out Henry wasn't laid off. He was fired for stealing samples to sell on the side. Rachel started therapy yesterday. She says she needs to understand how she let things get so bad, how she went from being strong and independent to someone who lived in fear of her own husband. The Rachel I grew up with is slowly coming back. She's staying focused on her nursing, where she's always excelled. Her colleagues have been incredibly supportive, organizing meal trains and offering to switch shifts so she can meet with her lawyer. As for me and Rachel, we're cautiously rebuilding. She apologized for letting Henry turn her against me, and I apologized for not finding a better way to help her sooner. We're taking it day by day. Yesterday, she even managed to laugh about something for the first time in months. Henry's actions are catching up with him fast. His friends have abandoned him after learning about the blackmail. The loan sharks might be in jail, but their associates have been calling about the money he still owes. His lawyer dropped him after he showed up drunk to their meeting. He's facing potential criminal charges for the blackmail and financial fraud. Sometimes I still can't believe how everything unfolded from a simple family barbecue. But Rachel is free now, and that's what matters. She's got a long road ahead of her, but at least she's not walking it alone anymore.